Good evening. Welcome to our fifth annual Kusky Design Lecture and Dialogue. My name is Prasad Boradkar, and I have the privilege and the joy of serving as the Dean of the College of Design here at the University of Minnesota. We are so excited, so fortunate, and so happy to feature B.C. Williams and Bruce Mau at this year's event, and we will introduce them momentarily. Let's begin with a land acknowledgement and our statement of unity. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities is located on traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. We are committed to recognizing the complex history of this land by honoring the truth of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement. We respect the peoples on whose land we live, work, and learn as we seek to improve and strengthen relations with our tribal nations. We resist the culture of anti-Black racism, and we stand with our Hmong, Asian, Asian American, Pacific Islander, and other communities. We know that words are not enough, and we remain committed to the work of eradicating injustices against all Black, Indigenous, people of color, and those whose gender identity transcends the binary. We stand with victims of violence and strive for peace in our community and beyond. It is so heartwarming to see such a lovely crowd on this frigid November night. In the audience today, we have students, faculty, staff members, leaders, and not only from the College of Design, but from colleges and schools across the university. We have university leadership here, including our provost, who I will introduce in a few minutes, vice presidents, deans, directors, faculty, students, other members of the university. Also in the audience are members of several professional design organizations in the Twin Cities, people from many cultural institutions, corporations, community members. Thank you all so much for being here today. If I was to thank everyone who's made KDI, or the Kusky Design Initiative, possible, and this event possible, there would be no time left for BC and Bruce at all. So I will express my gratitude to a few people and know that I'll find the rest of you, no matter where you're hiding, to thank you in person. So the Kusky Design Initiative has been made possible by the incredible generosity of the Manitou Fund, which has supported us from day one and continues to guide us and help us financially, intellectually, and strategically. We have a few people in the audience today from the Manitou Fund who I'd like to thank. Greg McNeely, Heather Din, Oliver Din, thank you so much for being here today. And thank you for everything you do for KDI. I'd also like to thank Alan Kolkowitz and Carol Strohecker, who are also here today. Alan, an architecture alum of our college, and Carol, who served as dean prior to me, both serve as KDI advisors. Thank you so much. Two more names, and I'm done. Monica Rush, who is our executive director of KDI, who has recently joined us from Target, and Alana Nissen, our KDI coordinator. The two of them have done 99.99% of the work that has made this event possible. Okay, I hope you can excuse me for saying this, for being biased in saying this, but I believe that the practice of design plays a critical and an essential role in shaping our world, which includes our material landscape, all that you see around you, but also our digital experiences. But design can only do a good job with this immense responsibility if we partner with other disciplines. We can help shape a more just, equitable, sustainable, functional, and a beautiful world when we work with biologists, engineers, health officials, business experts, lawyers, teachers, corporations, government officials, not-for-profit organizations. In other words, everyone. We need to work with everyone as designers. And engaging in dialogue within and beyond the design disciplines is one of the fundamental goals of KDI, the Kusky Design Initiative. And that is why B.C. Williams and Bruce Mau are here today. They work across disciplines, they tackle wicked problems, they teach, and the best of all, they do this with a sense of joy and optimism. And they'll talk about this in their lecture today. I cannot wait to hear what they have to say. But before we get to Bruce and BC, I'd like to introduce our Executive Vice President and Provost, Gretchen Ritter, who is the Chief Academic Officer of the University of Minnesota's 5 campuses and the Provost of the Twin Cities campus. She joins us from Syracuse University, where she was the inaugural Vice President for Civic Engagement and Education. In this role, Ritter collaborated with academic programs and units to advance appreciation for civic engagement and community service while facilitating campus-wide programming to foster civil dialogue and free expression across viewpoints. During this time, she was also professor of political science in the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs and a faculty affiliate with the Program for Advancement of Research on Conflicts and Collaboration. Dr. Ritter previously served as a vice chancellor, provost, and chief academic officer at Syracuse University. Prior to that, she was the executive dean and vice provost of the College of Arts and Sciences at The Ohio State University, the dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University, and the vice provost of undergraduate education and faculty governance at the University of Texas at Austin. Please join me in welcoming Provost Gretchen Ritter.
Good evening. Thank you, Dean, for the introduction and for inviting me to be part of your event tonight. The University of Minnesota is an engine of growth, knowledge, and progress. With this fall's release of our strategic roadmap for the future, we are at the dawn of the University of Minnesota's exciting next chapter. We will push for even greater prominence, excellence, and leadership. We will strengthen our ties to Minnesota communities in every corner of the state. We will face this time of unprecedented challenge and change with a commitment to our community and a commitment to innovation, creativity, and agility, and prepare our students to go forth and do the same. We will fulfill our land-grant mission to work and improve the lives of all of the people in our state. And of course, we will continue to provide world-class education, scholarship, research, and creative arts. As we look to operationalize this plan, design has a critical role to play. Designers excel at taking ideas into practice, realizing the embodiment of a concept through craft, partnership, and catalyzing bolder, more generous futures. You imagine a better way, and you have the skills, tools, and dedication to bring that to reality. That mindset is absolutely essential for all of us at the University of Minnesota, regardless of discipline, so thank you for serving as an example to the rest of us. The College of Design at this university, as one of the most comprehensive design colleges in the country, brings together faculty, staff, and students who work to shape a better world. The Kuski Design Initiative has a strong legacy of nurturing this curious, collaborative spirit here on campus through its scholarship, faculty support, events, and programming. Tonight's dialogue invites all of us, students, faculty, community members, to see ourselves as co-designers of a more sustainable and equitable future. I would like to thank the Manitou Fund for their generous support of this initiative. And I am so pleased to welcome famous designers and change agents B.C. Williams and Bruce Mao here today. Please join me in welcoming Monica Rush, the Kuski Design Initiative's inaugural Executive Director, who will introduce our topic and our speakers for this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to welcome you to our 5th annual Kuski Lecture and Dialogue, which is a signature program of the Kuski Design Initiative. Thank you to Dean Brodkar and to Provost Ritter for setting the tone for the evening. When I joined the College of Design this summer to lead this initiative, I was excited to step into a role that brings together designers and collaborators across disciplines to imagine and realize better futures. In my experience building and leading Target's first responsible design team, I saw firsthand the power of designers to not only imagine and create better futures, but also to cultivate change into action across partners and systems. In a world facing increasingly complex, interconnected challenges, the role of design as a catalyst for positive change has never been more vital, and that's exactly the spirit that we're here to explore tonight. The Kuski Design Initiative honors the legacy of Christopher Kuski, a 1978 graduate of our landscape architecture program. Chris believed deeply in the power of collaboration, dialogue, and connection, values that resonate profoundly now more than ever. We are proud to carry forward his legacy in all that we do. I'd also like to take a moment to recognize Alan Kolkowitz, Chris's partner, and Carol Strohecker, former Dean of the College of Design, whose vision and leadership brought this initiative to life. And we are deeply grateful to the Manitou Fund and the McNeely family for their continued support. Lastly, this night would not be possible without the help of Alana Nissen, KDI's program coordinator. This evening, we turn our attention to the transformative potential of design, to its ability to reframe problems, spark imagination, and drive real change. It's an honor to introduce our 2025 Kuski lecturers, Bruce Mau and B.C. Williams, two extraordinary thinkers and practitioners whose work not only embodies these ideals, but empowers others to take action. Bruce Mau is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Massive Change Network, a global design consultancy based in the Chicago area. A renowned designer, innovator, educator, author, and artist, Bruce is recognized for developing a holistic, systems-based methodology for life-centered design. That underpins Massive Change Network's process and practice. Over nearly 4 decades of design innovation, he has collaborated with global brands, leading organizations, heads of state, renowned artists to address complex challenges through design. In addition to his practice, Bruce serves as a professor and strategic curricular advisor at institutions worldwide, including Arizona State University, the University of New South Wales, Pratt Institute, Northwestern University, and the MacEwan School of Architecture at Laurentian University in his hometown of Sudbury, Ontario. His celebrated career includes authoring and designing more than 250 books, among them the landmark Small, Medium, Large, Extra Large with Rem Koolhaas, and most recently MC24 and The Nexus, Augmented Thinking for a Complex World. His life and work were the subject of the 2022 documentary Mau, which premiered at South by Southwest and has continued to elevate design in the cultural spotlight. B.C. Williams, co-founder and Chief Insights and Analytics Officer of Massive Change Network, is a global thought leader whose work explores the socio-emotional dimensions of how change is embraced and absorbed. Her design approach weaves together data, stories, and the humanities to inspire new ways of thinking and doing. Known for her fact-based optimism, especially in the healthcare sector, she co-hosts Health 2049, a forward-looking podcast that invites experts to envision the future of health and wellness. An advocate, educator, and design visionary, BC also serves as an executive strategist, curricular advisor, lecturer, and judge for design events in higher education institutions worldwide, including Arizona State University, the University of New South Wales, the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, Design Week Ireland, and the Gensler Research and Innovation Awards. Together, Bruce Mau and B.C. Williams lead Massive Change Network, uniting their complementary expertise in systems thinking and socio-emotional insight to advance the practice of life-centered design. In 2022, they launched Massive Action, a global multidisciplinary learning initiative that aims to inspire and empower 100 million designers to accelerate positive change. The inaugural project, created in collaboration with the University of New South Wales, brought Massive Change Network's MC24 design principles to life through action prototypes, addressing Sydney's most pressing challenges. Through their partnership, Bruce and BZ continue to model how design can operate as a catalyst for collective imagination, transformation, and hope for a better future. And without further ado, Bruce Mau and B.C. Williams.
after that introduction, I think we better do a good job.
This better be good.
Better be good. Okay. So again, we'd like to acknowledge the lands on which the University of Minnesota sits with the Dakota people. And we have so much gratitude in our hearts today. We're so happy to be with you. We'd like to thank the Dean, Dean Prasad, for inviting us here, Monica and Alana, and the Kusky Design Initiative. We are super thrilled to be here with you, and this is what a Canadian looks like when she's super thrilled and a little bit nervous, I'm just gonna say, so just put it out there.
Okay. I'm a designer of cities and carpets, institutions and brands, ideas and social movements. I seduced BC some 33, 34 years ago. I showed her my poster that I had made for John Cage, and she cried, and we were off to the races.
I'm such a nerd. And I'm BC, and I'm a designer of manufactured epiphanies. Together, we have developed a different way of thinking about design and the responsibilities that we now have. And so we're here to share a little bit and demonstrate a little bit about how we think and what we do.
So I'll take you through some of the kind of work that we do and the kind of mindset that we've evolved. And I hope that when we finish today, you'll walk away with these three ideas. First, that we need to encourage and develop and really kind of build a conscious awareness of life and begin to understand our place in the universe, our kind of global planetary ecosystem, and sort of where we are in this world. Secondly, that we are all designers, that no matter what you do, you're a designer. You're imagining a future that isn't random or accidental, that you want something specific. So that we can be designers of our own minds. You can design the brain that you have, our own lives and our world. And then finally, that we need to evolve from designing discrete objects, so things, and really begin to design complex ecosystems, really beginning to design in context, the context of the rest of life. So that's what we're hoping to accomplish today. We begin with this diagram that was, for us, a kind of discovery in the work that we did for Massive Change, a project that we started in 2002. And we discovered that that design had actually changed its scale and place in the order of things. The image on the left is sort of how we all think of it, and I think mostly still think of it, that design is a subset of business, that business happens in a cultural context, and that culture happens within the natural world, that this is sort of how things are done. And what we saw was that design had actually changed scale, that business, culture, and even nature, and VC will talk about some of this, even nature itself are now our design projects. When I first did the diagram, everyone that saw it thought, Bruce, you're a megalomaniac, you're crazy. You just want to control the whole world. And I said, look, it's not about control, it's about responsibility. You know, if we don't do this, if we don't design nature, we destroy it. If you look around the world, there's plenty of evidence of that. And when you see something else, it's because we're designing that something else. And now today, we're going all over the world to try to redesign the mistakes that we made. So let's look at life. Let's start with life itself. There's 546 gigatons of biomass on the Earth. And that is distributed according to these categories. So there's a lot of different kinds of life. The biggest, by far, is plants. So we really live a plant life. We live a plant world. The second category is bacteria. The second biggest category of life is bacteria. And you can see, you can go follow it all the way around, and at the bottom there, very fourth from the end, is humans. With 8 billion of us, I mean, think about what 8 billion people weigh. With 8 billion of us, we only represent 0.01% of biomass. And you think about bacteria, you realize that you are more bacteria cells than human cells. So bacteria in you and on you outnumber human cells by 10 to 1. So you're by far a population of bacteria much greater than a population of human cells. And each person carries between 3 and 6 pounds of bacteria on you and in you. So that's where we live in this distribution of life. It's not one or the other, it's all stitched together. And that's what we have to kind of develop a consciousness of, in order that what we design is actually supporting that life and getting through what E.O. Wilson called the bottleneck, the next 50 years. Not forever, but the next 50 years are going to be critical. So that's sort of who we are and how we are. So that 1.1% of biomass is outweighing, it's affecting and impacting the other 99.99%. Today, the biomass of livestock is 20 times the biomass of wild mammals. I was so shocked by this. I thought the number would be the inverse. I thought we would have, some animals, and then the rest of the world would have, 20 times as much. But it's the inverse. And this is where those animals live. This is the Earth. It's an image of the Earth and the oceans, the currents and movement of the ocean over time. And what you realize is that we shouldn't really be called the Earth, because 70% of the surface is ocean. We name them different oceans, but there's really only one ocean, the ocean. And it moves around the whole world. And it makes us who we are and where we are. And it has an extraordinary impact. I mean, you will notice that England on this map is north of Winnipeg. But it's the energy from that current that comes through the Gulf and up to England that makes it a place where you can actually grow palm trees and garden all year round. I mean, it's extraordinary.
You make them seem luckier than us prairie folks. I'm just saying.
You turn that energy off, and it's a totally different England. And this is what we're doing on Earth. We make these extraordinary machines that can process the living world at a pace that we've never been able to in the past. I mean, you see this thing, and I wanted you to get, it's not as loud as the real thing, but it's pretty loud. So I wanted you to get some sense of the violence of what we do every day. What that means is that we can cut 27 soccer fields a minute of forest. So we're cutting down in the next minute, going 24/7, 365, all year, all day, and all night. We are cutting down 27 soccer fields per minute during that time. So over the course of this lecture, we'll see another, several hundred soccer fields, thousands of soccer fields, in fact, cut down to meet our needs. And this is the kind of savagery that we leave in our wake. And imagine if this catches fire, what kind of conflagration that's going to mean. This is the work of Ed Burtynsky, who has been photographing the impact of humans on the world. So the status quo is really killing us. It's really problematic. And we went to Banff for a conference, a leadership conference, and there was a young woman there, and she asked this question. She said, "Why aren't things changing?" Because every presenter was talking about innovation and solutions and collaboration and all the kinds of things that we're going to talk about tonight. And she could barely hold her anger, but she asked the question, "Why aren't things changing?" And the speaker that she asked the question of didn't really answer it. But I did. It's like, when I went up for my presentation, I said, you remember that woman? I want to talk about this question because it's really a very interesting question. It's like we've known so much, we have so much data for decades. Why aren't we changing? Why aren't we? And it's, for me, one of the kind of central questions that we are really committed to grappling with. Citizens have every right to ask that question. Designers have the responsibility to answer it. So we can, they can ask this question. We must answer it. We must have an answer to that question. It's our responsibility. Practically everything we do today needs to change. Almost nothing is built for the future. Almost everything we do is from the past. It's just what Michael Crow at ASU calls filiopietism, undue respect for elders. It's like we just keep doing what we've learned. We're still doing most things as if we own nature and have unlimited resources, when the opposite of that is true. We work as if we didn't invent waste. The only time you see waste is when humans have arrived. We treat nature like a pantry and a toilet. It's a kind of terrible paradox that we dump every toxic thing into it and expect that it's going to continue to provide pristine resources for us. We think short-term and we pass the check to our kids. We expect not to take responsibility for the kind of good times that we're having. And we dump problems we can't solve into places we can't see. In other words, out of sight, out of mind is our operating system. If we can't see it, it's not a real problem. It's somebody else's problem. It's an externality. And many of our solutions create more problems than they correct because they're designed as objects, not systems. So we think of the problem as an object, we take it out of context to solve it, and when we put it back in context, it produces all kinds of havoc that we could have predicted if we could think of it in context. So things really have to change. Massive change is entirely possible because we are doing it, and we have been doing it for hundreds of years. And I'll show you a series of data visualizations that are absolutely extraordinary. It's a work of Max Roser at Our World in Data. And what he did was he looked at the most important metrics over the last 200 years represented by 100 people. So if you imagine that you could represent the whole world as 100 people, how many of those people are educated? 200 years ago, only 17 out of 100 were educated. Today, it's only 14 are uneducated. So we have seen this incredible positive inversion by design. We designed all the things that we need to do that. And you can see that, for me, what was really striking is how smooth the line is. Right? It doesn't sort of hesitate. There are times when we're going more steeply up and times when it's a little flatter, but it's very smooth and it's totally committed. And you can see where the line is today. We intend to get those 14 people. That we're going to move the whole world into educated. And there's millions of people having presentations and meetings right now working on that problem. Literacy is very similar. Only 12 could read. Only 12 out of 100 people could read in 1820. Today, only 13 are unable to read. Now, when I say only, that's still a lot of people, and we're, again, working very hard to get to those last 13 out of 100. Democracy, we had almost no democracies until quite recently, and then a real surge, and in this case, a very bumpy line. And it seems like right at the moment it's going down a little bit, which is what we're working on. So that doesn't happen. Vaccination, similar in the sense that we had nothing for thousands of years. It was zero since the beginning of time until about 1950 when we suddenly had this extraordinary capacity that really changed the world and made it possible for us to be 8 billion. And again, we can see a little bump to the lower end. We are trying to work on that. Extreme poverty. Only 21 out of 100 were not living in extreme poverty in 1820. Now only 9 are still living in extreme poverty. Now, again, it's a lot of people. If you're living in extreme poverty, you don't care how small that number is. But again, you can see that we are working on that, and that's really tilting up. And this is the one that really blew me away, child mortality. In 1820, if you had 10 children, over 4 of them died by the time they reached 5 years old. So roughly half your children are dying. And it's why the life expectancy was so low. But you can see what we've been doing. Today, that was, in 1820, 43 out of 100 died, and now 4 out of 100 died. So it's been a 10x improvement in that number. And again, there's a lot of people working to get that number as close to zero as we can. We'll never be perfectly zero, but we are working to make it as close as we possibly can. What we realized in sort of working through that data was that we don't have failure problems. We're not failing, even though it certainly feels like it at the moment. We're succeeding so radically that we are producing a new class of problem that are more complex, more challenging. They don't fit into categories easily. They're really tough new challenges, and we call them success problems. On this graph, the black and white divide is population increase, and all the other lines are resource implications. So it's not like 200 years ago we were nicer people. We just were fewer. Now with 8 billion going to 10 billion, we just keep increasing the impact that we have, and we have to think about how to think about that in new ways to solve those design challenges. This brings us to what we call the opportunity stack. Those success problems are opportunities. The people who solve those problems will be the wealth creators and the leaders of the 21st century. We see ecological change, food insecurity, global pandemics, racial injustice, democracy, housing insecurity, and plus. New ones that we can't predict or don't know yet that are coming. We do know that they're coming. We just don't know what they are yet. So we need a design methodology for this scale of challenge and really the ability to kind of think differently. And we no longer have the luxury of doing it one at a time. In the past, they came slowly, and you could kind of prepare for them as they emerged, and you could really overcome them. Now they're all happening simultaneously, and they're all connected. So food insecurity is connected to ecology. And as things kind of stack up, we see the complexity of solving them increases. So that's kind of where we're at, but something fundamental has changed. This is an image of New York when it disappeared in the smoke from the fires in Quebec. So Quebec had huge conflagrations, and that smoke went south, and it made it almost impossible to breathe in New York. You couldn't go outside. And when that happened, it changed the conversation because we all feel the truth. So I don't have to give you the data. When you can't breathe, it's a very different conversation than, let me tell you about a spreadsheet I see that shows the kind of increase in particulate matter. You're just not interested. You want to really understand what's happening. So the world is not moving fast enough in those kinds of issues, and really in a kind of crisis way of thinking, where we are moving fast, much of the progress remains invisible. Because we have a media culture that is structurally organized around violence and conflict, the good story just doesn't get published. It doesn't get distributed. It is, there are things happening. There are, other venues emerging. But for the most part, we focus on violence and conflict, and we forget all the accomplishments that we have, so we're certain that we don't have them. And that, for me, is one of the great challenges of our time. We must expand our ability to think and create solutions, first of all, at the scale of the challenges. So these challenges are happening. They have a scale to them, and it's why we're so committed to producing more designers. We want to produce a solution that meets the challenge so that the world can see that the right things are happening to provide some stability through the turmoil. If you think about the revolutions, our students are going to live through 3 revolutions. They have, their lives are going to be kind of opened up in absolutely extraordinary possibilities, but also things that completely change some of the foundations of how we live and how we work.
All right. So thanks, Bruce. So one of the things that we want to talk about is why optimism is so important, why when you take action, it builds hope, and when you have hope, you take action, and then you do more and more, right? So scientifically proven, part of our work is that you cannot be inspired and afraid at the same time. There's only one or the other. There's a neural pathway in the brain. And so our work is to turn what's invisible and make it visible. The more you can see that people are taking action, the more that you will do. And then you'll build more hope, and you'll take more action and be more in control. So design is really about leadership, and that's what we're talking about today. When you're a designer, you're a leader, right? You have different ways of thinking and different ways of living. It's also entrepreneurial. You see a problem, or you see an opportunity, you fix it. You get the group together, and it actually builds capacity, and it builds possibility, and it also builds wealth. And so we have a funny relationship to problems, but it's like we get to do it. I say always get in the hard work line. The other line's longer. So if you want to, be involved, get to work, become a designer. So the other thing that we have is just a unique set of skill sets, certainly within the design school, that we want to actually make universal. You have a vision, right? And that's really important, right? So people can see what you're doing. And so that ability to see, translate that into an action, translate that into an idea, and translate that into impact is really what we're about, and that's what design does. And when you have an intention, you become a designer. So if you have goals and objectives, you're a designer. And just a show of hands, does anybody here not have any goals or objectives that they'd like to reach? Right? I didn't think so. So, you're thinking about your future and how you're going to get there. Is there a way to do it? Yes, there are methodologies, but what we're trying to tell you is that when you collaborate, you can find different ways of doing different things. So, it's not limited to what we can see. And that for me was a big, big, big moment in my life as someone who comes from the humanities, very verbal. But then I realized there are other ways that you can infiltrate, certainly working at a systems level. But if you have this ability to imagine a future and systematically get there, that's the best definition we have of leadership. Business school says some theories, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But, the idea here is if you want to get to something new, something possible, something that hasn't been imagined before, you need to just have it and systematically work to get there. And then we can design the visible. So we're having a little question and answer session here, so we're going to move over here.
So BC,
Yep.
do you believe that we are all designers? This for me is one of the fundamental questions.
Yeah, I do. I do believe we're all designers. And why do I believe that? People want to create things. They want to make things. They want to have things be possible. And so we have that all within ourselves. The thing is, sometimes we're told that we're not creative, that we can't do things, but you have to get that out of your head. If you want to do it, there are people who want to work with you, you can get there. And the reason why I believe that we are all designers is because when Bruce designed the Massive Change exhibit, it was a 20,000 square foot exhibition traveling through 3 cities, Vancouver, Chicago, and Toronto. In order to do this project, we had to form a school called the Institute Without Boundaries. And we had an advertisement, looking for people who wanted to jump fields and swim across fords and so on, sort of felt like Shackleton's Adventure, if you wanted to do that, to think about the world of design. More than half of the students that designed and created this exhibit were not designers. We had a squash player, we had a broadcaster, you name a golfer also. But they decided that they wanted to come and learn this new way of working. And we needed that multiple intelligence to actually think about the world of design, right? So it couldn't just be designers. It couldn't just be about Velcro and what it looks like. So through this work, and this is kind of what changed our perspective, is that how important is design? Design permeates absolutely everything we do. It's not a singular. Our cities are designed, our transportation is designed, living organisms are designed, wealth creation, the market is a design, right? Whatever you assign that has goods and services or values, that's design. Our energy is design, you get the point. Everything has design running through it. And that means then, and what Bruce talked about earlier about being responsible, how we think about each of these, what we call design economies, is really important. And that's why going back to Prasad saying that we need to work with biologists, historians, engineers, you name it, we're all designers, because then we can actually look at problems through different lenses. And I promise that tonight, if we do one thing, we'd like you to develop a third eye. That's the thing, a third eye, which gives you the ability to look at issues and problems just a little differently and hold space. Okay. So one of the things of this project was around 25 years ago, people were very positive, or not positive, pessimistic. And they thought the world's going to heck in a handcart. And we're thinking, with all these 24 students doing, 10,000 years or 60 years of research simultaneously, we started to find that we're doing good things, actually. Things that we thought were bad or poor were actually really positive, that we were moving the needle, but you couldn't see it. So with this, we thought, are we making advances in health? Are we making advances in life expectancy, education, et cetera, the charts that you saw before? And it turns out, yes, we were in spades. Now, Professor Toynbee was a historian, a British historian, who wrote a 10-volume history of the world. And in 1957, he had written this, and he said in 1957, right, that the 20th century won't be remembered for war and conflict. It will be remembered as a time, that they took the whole welfare of the human race as a practical objective. So the thesis was practical objective means design, and we're doing it. And you look back and you think, actually, yeah, we did. United Nations, peacekeeping, you think of all these things that we took for granted before. These were all things to advance the welfare. When we went to go visit a high school to share the exhibition, Bruce encountered this young woman who said, Mr. Mao, I don't think you're thinking big enough. And Bruce is like, really? She said, no, I don't think so. The welfare of the whole human race as a practical objective is the 20th century, but we're living in the 21st century. Our objective is all of life. And for us, we had a blind spot. And it really kind of rocked our world, because now, you're right, this doesn't belong to us. We don't have dominion over it. So what are we going to do when we're building new things, and how do we bring grace and gratitude for the resources that we use as we're building our world? So, and it can't be, we can't do anything. Well, design is the center of this. Whatever we choose to do, and it's a choice, right? We can make those decisions, and we can still feed and clothe a further 2 billion people, because I don't want a world where you're not going to clothe or feed 2 billion people, but we're going to do them in brand new ways, and that's what design is about.
So that experience blew our minds. It was a mind blower. And it was a high school. Tamara was a high school student who asked that question and reframed it in the 21st century to say, it's not about humans anymore, it's about all of life. And it's radically different question. So we realized we needed really to kind of shift our cosmology to put life at the center, not just humans, and to really see ourselves in the world and in the universe in a new and different way. So BC, what do you mean when you say we live a designed life?
It's just facts, and I'll show you. Everything in your life is designed. Products and experiences. This room is a design. This whole event is a design construct. Energy and movement. We're redesigning our cars. We're looking at new ways of heating and cooling our homes. That's all design. Sports and media, GoPros, new games, Nintendo, Twitch, you name it, all those things. Those are designed. You may think they're technologies, but your entertainments are designed, okay? And health and medical, we're building prosthesis, things to help people work, walk better, feel better, et cetera, and changing their abilities to move.
So that is a exoskeleton designed for military application, but these are all people who have never walked or have lost the ability to walk, using it for the first time. And you can see in their faces the kind of transformational impact that it generates.
Right. And even your leisure and travel is designed. Everything is designed. You go cosplay, you've got Comic-Con, that's the whole design world. All of those franchises, all design. And the greatest design synthesis of all is the city, right? I mean, it's pretty remarkable. And even nature is designed, as you see. If you just close your eyes for 1 second and try to imagine any place or any time in your life where you have not been in a designed environment, almost nil. From womb to tomb is a design experience. From the baby carriage to the casket, right? Everything in between, quinceaneras, weddings, whatever, the whole thing, every single one of the aspects of your life has been designed. And that's why it's so important how we think about it. So this is Bruce's favorite picture, but I want to tell you about how nature is designed, right? So this is a pixel, nature at the level of a pixel.
What you can see here, this is the border between Mexico and the US. And what you can see is that it's a pixelated image. In the urban areas, the pixel is a block or a building. As you get away from the center, the pixels increase in scale, so they're 100 acres. But they're not different in kind. We are superimposing a grid on the whole planet and turning the whole planet into one interconnected system of pixelated world that we can look at, we can map, we can control, we can produce. It all becomes part of a design system. So the 100-acre pixel is not different than the building. It's just a different version of that pixel out in the outer regions. So what you see is that we've now superimposed a 3 by 3 meter grid over the entire planet and given each 3 meter square a 3-word address. And if you look up what 3 words, you'll see in this room, there are probably 20 or 30 of those squares. Each of those squares has an address, and it means that we can ship things to you. If you're a migrant on the move from war-torn, a situation, you can actually have an address everywhere that you go. So we can find you the next day in another place. So we can deliver services to you as you move in crisis away from violence. And so this kind of way of thinking means that the world is now one design system. And you can look up your address. I encourage you to do it. Look up your address when you go home tonight on what 3 words, and you'll discover what little square and what 3 words are actually your address at your home. So BC, why do you believe that the quality of our design determines our quality of life?
It's super simple. Bad design, bad life. Good design, good life. If you design a beautiful space and you put somebody who's unhealthy in it, they won't be healthy. And in fact, if you put a healthy person in a toxic environment, they won't be healthy. And so you think about the experiences in your life, and one that we draw on is time. If you have a bad experience with time, you, a person, an event, a thing, You will never get that back. There is no amount of money anyone can pay you for that. That hour of that bad experience is terrible. And so that's why we think about design with intention. It's super important, right? It's $1.95 to make a bad thing and $1.95 to make a good thing. You pick, right? But this is where we want to go. So,
Can I say something about that
You
before
may.
we move on? I did a lot of work with a man named Rem Koolhaas, who was an extraordinary architect and a real kind of genius, one of the great people in the field. And we traveled together everywhere for like 5 years, working on the book that we did. And when we would go to hotels, if the hotel was not good, Rem would have an absolute hissy fit. Like he would go crazy. And I used to think, dude, like it's a bad night in a hotel. Like, take it easy. And I always thought that I was right and he was wrong. That it was like, what
Drama
a
queen.
weird thing to throw a tantrum about. But over time I realized, oh man, I'm wrong, he's right. Because when you have that bad experience, you have it forever. You don't get that time back. You can't bank it, you can't recover it. It's lost forever. So a bad time in bad design lasts forever. And it's no wonder that Rem, who spent a lot more time in hotels than I did, he was really sensitive to it. And I realized over time that he was absolutely right. So,
but the idea about bad design and bad life, right? If we don't design our environments or take care of things, if left by accident, we don't take care of it. It becomes destroyed, out of sight, out of mind. And so knowing that there's no there's only one thing on this planet, which is life, you see this as an opportunity. So we're starting. It's not the worst thing in the world. So the idea here is like, guess what? We're not at zero. There's there's room to move. You can see in the dark blue the areas of the ocean that we're starting to rehabilitate. You can see with the green the areas that we're working on rehabilitating. And you start to see that when we put intention to these things, we can build it back. And for those of you that don't remember, there was a time when there was a hole in the ozone layer. We fixed that, right? When something that sounded super catastrophic, by design, collectively, we can fix that. So we have proof, right, that it's not bad forever. You can always, through design and intention and collaboration, fix the things that are here on our beautiful planet.
and before you move on,
Okay.
I show this as an example of what we're not doing.
I show what we're doing.
Right? It's also an indictment that we haven't done more, that we haven't preserved more of the natural world. And E.O. Wilson, before he died, who's maybe the greatest life scientist, said he wanted to preserve what he called half Earth.
Yeah.
He said, to get through the bottleneck, we should preserve half of what's left. So he was quite realistic. He said, we can't save all of it because there's things in motion that you're just not going to be able to stop. So let's conserve half of it. We're still not doing that. But we can do more. We can add to this, and people everywhere are working on doing that. Like there are millions of people working to add more and more land to the conservation areas of the world, and more ocean to the conservation of the world. But the question is, we're still facing a kind of race to see which one gets through the bottleneck.
I think Team Human, we're going to do it. I think the glass is half full in this one. So Bruce, my question for you, if the greatest challenges we face today were produced by design, how can we use design to solve those challenges ahead?
The challenges that we face now are what we call success problems. They're not problems because we failed. And for me, one of the most kind of sort of mind-changing insights that we had was working on COP28 in UAE, and we realized that we're really good at extreme environments. I mean, if you think about this place has extreme environments during several months of the year, and we've developed a whole way of moving around. We came over to this building underground, which was perfectly nice, and we developed a way of living under extremes. Just like in UAE, they built the whole country in the last 50 years in one of the most extreme environments in the world, where during certain months, if you go outside, I went down to the beach. Our hotel was like 200 meters from the beach. I went down there. I wasn't sure I was going to get back. I mean, it was so hot. And so what you realize is that we are actually capable in ways that we don't fully understand and appreciate. And because we have success problems, we succeeded by solving those problems over and over and over again. If we had succeeded less, we would have fewer problems. If we failed more, we'd have fewer problems. We'd be 1 billion people, and we could behave like frat boys, and it really wouldn't have any impact at all. But with 8 billion, it adds up. Going to 10 billion, it really has an impact. So we have to think differently about these new category of problems, and they don't fit the old disciplines. So the old disciplines, you could kind of drop a problem into that discipline, and they would solve it. That's no longer the case. It's a very, very complex set of challenges, and we need a new mindset of context, curiosity, and collaborative intelligence. You need to understand what's going on around the problem. What's feeding it? What's producing that problem? And we need that applied to the ecosystem and not only the object. So in other words, if you say this is the problem, it's easy to take this problem out of context and change it. But if you really look at this in context, you see, oh, there's a mine in the Congo that has to produce something in here. There's a mine in another part of the world that needs a little, it's producing another material. And if you look at the work of Mark Mills, he said that to produce, he's an engineer, contrarian, he said to produce 1 Tesla, you have to move 250 tons of earth. So imagine that Tesla is a solution. We would have to dig the biggest hole in the history of mankind. So we've got to think differently about how the problems are defined and really see them in context. One of our students in the Institute Without Boundaries produced the concept of what he called supply chain tourism. That designers should go to the places where the material is mined and produced for the products that they're designing, so that they have a consciousness of what they're speccing in their product. Mostly we have, we just put plastic, whatever we need. We just use it because it's there. But that there comes from somewhere. And you can see around the world that the kind of challenges that represents. So as designers, we have to be like first responders without the bravery. We're not that brave. But we do want to run towards the higher complexity challenges with a mindset of ecosystem design, and that's the only real way that we're going to be able to do that.
So our next topic is always search for the worst, which is a little bit weird because you think we're optimistic, but we are, and we'll get to that. So when I asked Bruce, what is life-centered design and why is that important? And then 2, why do we want to work at a higher level of complexity as designers?
So life-centered design is simply extending the advancement that we've made in human-centered design. So human-centered design, I'm going to think about the user, think about the human on the receiving end of it. And I'm going to help them by, first of all, caring for that citizen and thinking about their kind of experience. That's a perfectly good thing to start. We don't propose that we stop doing that. We just don't want to stop there. We want to keep going to the community, the kind of context, cultural context, and ultimately to the ecology, out beyond the individual. So life-centered design puts life and not just humans at the center. We start with human-centered design, but don't stop there. We extend empathy to the social context, and then on to the ecosystem that sustains us. It's really design in context. And there are no externalities. An externality is something that we invented in the finance department, and we apply it to the whole world. If I'm doing something and I can't resolve a problem, I simply take it off my books and I put it over there. And I call it an externality. It's someone else's problem. So when I drive my car and it produces exhaust, I don't put the exhaust into my car, because I would have fewer customers. I put the exhaust out the back. It's someone else's problem. That concept of externality has infected our thinking. There is no externality. There's no external to our ecology. There's one, you saw the ocean, there's one ocean. There's one environment, there's one ecosystem. So the idea that you can sort of dump it on someone else, somewhere else, is just a fiction, and we have to get beyond that fiction. So BC, what is ICON and why is it important to develop an ICON mindset?
So we're talking about the students now. This is for you. We are the parents of young people, and we get it, how crazy the world is. And, you know, the narratives, it's like, good luck. We're going to be fine, and so let's help you out here. And we say, as parents, we can't do that. That's part of the reasons why we started our studio, Massive Change, is to build that bridge. And so ICON is an event that we created for our students. We are working on the unhoused. And it started with, here's the unhoused. We have unhoused students or unhoused citizens around the world and in Arizona. And we have to decide, that's a design decision. Do we want to have people living rough and, you know, in distress on the street, our most vulnerable? And no judgment, it was just a design question, right? Do we want this or not? Nobody seems to be happy with the solutions that we have currently. And we recognize that if we wanted to design the housing problem, that it requires all of the disciplines within the university. It is a full systems thing, and every single department has a role to play in the design of the ecosystem to take care of our students and our citizens. And so with that, we thought, you don't have to wait. Young people feel like, oh, I have to wait till I graduate, I have to get permission for this, I have to do that. And we're like, you don't. Don't wait, do it now. Do it the best that you can. Do it, collaborate. We're here to help you, and we can all do it together. So we had a small studio, and then we invited other universities, so Arizona, and we had Virginia, and we had George Washington and Madison, and we thought, let's get together and see what we can do as a charrette, because when we took a poll, young people said, let's fix it now, let's change the language, let's do all these things. And we thought, okay, and people of a certain generation said, well, we should have some thoughts about that, and maybe we could learn to socialize. And these kids are like, no, now. So we created this event, this conference, and the students started to present their solutions for what they want to do among the unhoused. And they're presenting for, with, and by each other with information. And their voices really mattered. And we did it in Washington to make sure that the policymakers can hear that young people actually have the wherewithal, the skills. Not all of it, but they can do it together. And what we talked about for ICON is that the way that the world is designed now, you have clock problems, which are mechanical, systematic, and easy to fix. But the world that we live in, and what we're asking our young people to solve for, and us, is a cloud problem. Way complex, moving, nimble, you know, and you need to learn how to navigate this. And when we said at the beginning that everything needs to be redesigned, it's because most of our solutions are clock-based, not cloud-based. And so when we said this event, we thought, what are you people? You're icons, you're inspired. You need to be visionary and creative. You're connected, you're collaborative and interdependent. You're optimistic, you're hopeful and action-oriented, and you're nimble, right? Adaptable and swift. And these are the conditions that you need to live in now in this day and age. You need to have this in your mindset, you need this in your skill set, you need this in your toolkit. And so Bruce would reference COP. One of the things we did as an experiment was, how quickly can we show people around the world doing things to make their communities better in context? We used satellite, right? And we had film crews, and we could send them out in 6 weeks to 50 different countries to produce material to bring it back in 6 weeks. And they were all positive stories around change, what they're doing for their ecologies in their town. And so we recognize if we can do that in 6 weeks for a global conference, we can certainly do that in the studio and actually turn people from consumers of information to actionists. Okay, there's very different, right? And actionists.
We produced 50 short documentaries
in 6 weeks
about people changing the world, young people. Like the two young women in the middle row on the left, they started a global climate action group. They're 15 years old, and they have members from every continent. They have this whole global system, and it's astounding. They're extraordinary.
amazing. But here's also what we talk about. You need to be inspired, right? We talk about a mindset. So you know, neurologically, this is really important for us too, right? What does it do to your body when you're upset or when you're anxious? But what also happens when you're working and producing something? As we talked about earlier, it gets you going. When you inspire yourself, you can outperform yourself. And what we think about as designers is not only do you spot the problem, but you connect the dots and you put the wrap-around support. This is really important, and you do this in community. Next is you're connected. Like, we can't do anything by ourselves, right? And so understanding new ways of working, new ways of collaborating, you don't have to carry everything yourself. You have to realize that there are teammates beside you and among you that can help you carry the load. Nurture your own expertise, but bring people with you. It goes faster and it's way more fun. And optimistic, right? We don't have the luxury of cynicism. That's for somebody else. You know, imagine someone calls you up, hi, how you doing? Great. We want you to help us work on this thorny problem. We're like, oh, sucks to be you, I don't really want to do that. We can't answer the phone like that. It's like, okay, let's try and figure this out, right? Let's sort this, you know, it's not forever. We can get there. And this is part of the mindset. Say yes, and. And finally, nimble, right? The cloud problems, as we talked about, there's the opportunity stack. One day it's this, one day it's that. This is pulled under you, but understand that you have an anchor in design. Understand that you have an anchor in your values and the skill sets that you have to affect change as you understand it and move with the rhythm, right? Life doesn't have to happen to you. You can actually design strategies to get you around this, okay? And so this is what we put together, and one of the things we talk about is design. It's not what it looks like. We designed this purposely for action. Okay, students, let's get together, get outside, go do field research, meet people, understand what their needs are in design. And I gotta tell you, in 13 weeks, we had somebody design a machine learning model that actually can rate your city and figure out what your score is, right, for services and things you can do to actually fix your own house community. We had somebody who designed a washing machine with a hand crank that also, you know, charges your phone. 6 weeks looking at the problems of women and like keeping your clothes clean when you're out there and you don't have access to those things. So we can move fast and we can do well, and they've got patents and they're doing that, and that is 13 weeks, okay? Now, Bruce, because of this, right, why do we need to think outside of silos, pardon me, silo thinking?
So mostly, as we learn, we kind of deepen our experience and our content and our knowledge, but it's often within a kind of silo. It's within a domain, understandably, because the domains are rich and deep. But to confront these new challenges, we need to see the world through more than one set of glasses. So if you think about your expertise as a set of glasses, you need to kind of develop the ability to see the world differently through different glasses, a different perspective. And so this is a book that we did with Julio Otino, who was the Dean of Engineering at Northwestern. He made me a fellow at the school when we moved to Chicago. He lives right across the street from us. And he was there when we arrived, and Lisa arrived. And he said, please have your husband call me because I'd like to make him part of the faculty. So I called Julio. I said, Julio, I don't know anything about engineering. I work with some of them, but I really don't know anything. And he said, not a problem, because you don't need to be like us. We need to be like you. And I didn't really understand what he was talking about until eventually one day he said, look, if I walked into the faculty today and said, build me a bridge, the question they will ask is how thin? How efficient can we make the bridge? How beautiful and really elegant can we get the design? And he said, the question you would ask is, why do you need a bridge? Maybe a boat would be nicer. And when he said it, the moment he said it, I was like, okay, I get it. You're exactly right. A design mind is thinking differently than a mind that is really approaching things quantitatively. Right? So a design mind is combining quantitative with a kind of poetic, metaphorical, all kinds of other ways of thinking, really using both sides of the brain, even though that. And I can say the cover kind of says it best. It's augmented thinking for a complex world. So it's how do you think in this world of new challenges that are vexing and really, really troublesome, and the new convergence of art, technology, and science. I mean, what we saw and what we documented in the book is the distance that has evolved between the disciplines. That each of the disciplines has developed a kind of language, culture, systems, support, advancement, rewards, all of that very much within the discipline. And if you look at how they behave, you see they're very, very different. And so trying to understand what happens when you can put these worlds together, it's absolutely extraordinary. New things happen, and new things that wouldn't happen any other way. So this is the diagram that we evolved in our work and published in the book. And you can see that science is really about discovery, technology about invention, and art about creation. And those domains are very, very different. So chapter 4 of the book shows the 3 domains and 23 parameters, 23 criteria, and how they work differently. And a good way of understanding it is that if you say, what's the operating system? In science, it's standing on the shoulders of giants. So we want to work on all the work that has already been accomplished and approved by the scientific method and the scientific community worldwide. You want to stand on the shoulders of all those people and contribute and do something new that moves the world forward, that is a new thing, that is a contribution. In technology, you want to stand on the shoulders of giants to crush them. Right? You want to eliminate them because you've got the new thing. So in technology, the whole kind of enterprise is about replacing the existing domain, the existing regime, and start introducing the new one that will be wildly successful. In art, we want to stand alone. We don't want to stand on the shoulders of giants. We want to stand in a piece of real estate that no one's ever seen before. So if you think about, science is building up, right? It's a ladder. Technology is crushing, it's going down, and art is spreading out. It's like making the field more and more broad and wide and richer, but where each person, if you look at the work of Cindy Sherman, she does self-portraits. That's her thing. She owns that little piece of real estate, and if any other artist does a self-portrait, it has to be kind of conceived and sort of thought of in relation to her work. So that's the kind of 3 domains. And what you see in our world, in our kind of current world, the place where those worlds come together is in design. That in design, everything I do has to be scientifically sound. Everything I do is a technology of one sort or another. Even a book is a technology, it's just an old one. So no matter what I do, I'm producing a technology, but it only really works if it touches people. If I can inspire someone, then it works. If it doesn't have an emotional connection, then I can have all the technology and science I want, but it doesn't actually change anything. It doesn't improve people's lives. And what you see is that when you sort of think that way, it's really what we call whole brain. It's analytical, rational, quantitative, and aesthetic, divergent, and metaphorical. It's both of those things. And we actually worked with Julio to introduce what we call whole brain engineering at Northwestern, which has been wildly successful. They doubled the size of the engineering department during Julio's tenure. So this is what the book looks like, and chapter 2 is about the evolving domains, understanding how the domains work. In the popular view, art is about creation, technology about invention, and science about discovery. The reality is more complex. In other words, in science, there are a lot of artists who are extraordinary scientists. Some of the best scientists in history were also artists. And so you have this kind of, the reality is a much more complex picture. And we featured the work of this artist, technologist, creator, George Lucas. And this is a diagram of all of the projects that Lucas developed. So all the kind of technologies, companies, products, films, all the things that he's been applying the Nexus mindset to create these new things. And the central line, the Star Wars line, that central line recently sold for over $5 billion. So you can imagine the wealth that's getting created at this intersection. And that's what we need to think about to say, our capacity to solve these problems is also going to generate massive amounts of new wealth.
And what we're talking about here is innovation, right? Because if you've seen it before, it's production. So if you're going to get to new solutions, you actually have to innovate. And the only way you innovate is when you have all three, when you have science, when you have technology and art. And so as a practitioner or a student or anyone else, work on what you love. That's one of our principles. But how we actually navigate the next interchange of all the new technologies that's coming, think about art, science, and technology. Pick your lane, but understand to speak the language of the others. You don't have to be fluent, but you can be adjacent. And I think that's how you win, right? That's how you get the breakthrough. That's how you get your new third eye. And so if we leave you with anything and you want to design your life and your future, think across those three domains. When you're collaborating, learn that people have different reward systems, and you have this within the university, and respect that, but at the same time, hold on to what you believe to be true. So Bruce, there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So finally, we hope you take away these three ideas that we mentioned earlier, that we need to encourage conscious awareness of life, connecting our own lives to our global planetary ecosystem, that we are all designers of our minds, our lives, and our world, and that we need to evolve from designing discrete objects to designing complex ecologies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Continue this conversation with just a moment for us to reflect collectively on what this means for the future of design leadership and design education. And so I'm going to start with a specific question based on optimism, because optimism is one of those things that it can be really hard for many of us to find right now. And we saw a lot of reasons both to be optimistic, but also a lot of reasons to not be optimistic in your presentation tonight. And so there's two parts to this question. The first is, how do each of you personally sustain optimism in your own practice? And the second is, are there practices that you've seen really be successful in nurturing that optimism in emerging designers or in teams of designers when they're confronting what you're calling success problems?
Good question. Bruce, you can go first.
Yeah. Well, I take very seriously the responsibility as a designer. And, BC mentioned we don't have the luxury of cynicism. Cynicism is easy. It lets you off the hook. You don't have to do anything. You can just say, it's all hopeless. It's never going to happen. Optimism is hard. It's hard work, especially under certain conditions like what's happening right now. But as a designer, our responsibility is to bring the optimism. You know, when I do a project, I have to show up with a perspective that is possible. And in fact, you know, what we've learned over the years is that when you inspire people, they will go beyond what they can even think they can do. You know, like people will go beyond their limits when they're inspired. And so we make inspiration a central responsibility of our work, and not just a side effect that, you know, might or might not happen. No, we actually, if we're working on something, we're going in with the intent that you're going to see things in a new way, and you're going to see possibilities that you didn't think were there. And as you work that way, you know, one of the, you know, your question about sustaining it is that as you work that way, you build the brain of an optimist. Like, we're working with Center for Brain Health in Dallas on the neuroscience of design. And BC mentioned it a little bit, that the idea that when you're inspired, your neuropharmacy changes. So new drugs are being pumped into your brain, and those drugs make you outperform yourself and outperform others. So you can see patterns that you wouldn't otherwise see. You can see connections. You have a bigger connected brain when that happens. And so as you develop it, like you realize over time, you're actually laying down the tracks in your mind that are optimistic. And you're creating an optimistic mindset. That's why it's so important to govern what you're exposed to. Like, if you steep yourself in a kind of disgusting fluid of narcissism and cynicism, you will come out cooked like that, you know? And it's not, you know, it's not unpredictable. It's very predictable. And so we take very seriously the responsibility of doing that and the long-term opportunity that it represents, because as you build that, you just see new things. You see, I mean, if I think about, like, I think I'm the most fortunate designer of the last half century because of that, you know, because I decided to do that. I wasn't naturally optimistic. I wasn't anything like that. It just opened up that kind of spirit.
I start with, I know this is going to sound a little bit strange, but you get to choose. And you know, you work on what you love. And so when things are, you get to choose, so I get to do this, and I get up every day, and I'm like, this is amazing. And I feel really blessed about that. But then, even when it gets hard, I'm like, okay, like that was a moment. But then I'm going to find my way out, you know? And it's not like we're Pollyanna all the time, you know, rose-colored glasses. But generally, you know, sometimes the reality is it's tough. But then you also recognize, okay, like that's a minute, that's a day. And we can get through that. And you just keep going. But the results speak for themselves. And it's important, I think, to surround yourself with people who, not to get in a bubble, but, you know, like somebody's got the jokes, somebody's got the whatever, somebody's got the levity. You know, it's part of your Renaissance team to actually help you get through the day. Someone else has all these different skill sets. And so, you know, you don't have to bear it all by yourself. And so that's what I would say. And choose carefully, choose your partner wisely, and that means life partner and business partner. And then the projects that you take on, because that's also, you know, it goes a full circle, right? So I just think about that when you're working.
Maybe I could just mention a couple of quick things. One, Bruce says he's not a natural optimist, but I think he is. But he's the designer of joy. I mean, you guys bring so much optimism into the world. It's amazing. And that is infectious. right? So you have an optimistic team, it kind of gets you kind of in that space as well. And the other thing I'll mention really quickly is what's really important for us to do our jobs is compartmentalization. Like I think of myself also as a very optimistic, kind of happy-go-lucky guy, but I'd be lying if I said there aren't days when I'm like, oh my God, this world is coming to an end. But you have to compartmentalize. You have to take this, okay, I'm going to get through that. My next thing, I'm going to be a happy, joyous person. So I think that compartmentalization is important, and getting infected by each other, I think, is important as well.
Yeah. I mean, the anxiety is real, right? So let's just put that out there. And we're working on a book about, designing your brain, and the Gestalt is angst, right? It doesn't define you, but you're recognizing everything everywhere all at once. And so just find your footing, and I would offer, give yourself a moment of grace. I'll tell this really quick story about this. 20 years ago, I had the good fortune of meeting Nobel Prize winner Sir Harry Kroto, and he won it for carbon-80, this molecule. And I said, so how does one become a Nobel Prize winning chemist and discover new molecules? And he said, my parents allowed me to take apart anything I wanted in my house from the age of 3. So he took apart the television, the car, you name it, everything he took apart. And this was pre-iPhone, imagine that. So if you had a Nokia, if you know what that is, he had a Nokia phone, and he took it apart that day, and he said, I couldn't put my phone back together. And it was the first time in his life, he was 80 change at that time, that he was unable to reassemble something he'd taken apart. And my thought was, oh wow, if you got a Nobel Prize winner who can't take the phone apart and put it back together, what does that mean for me as a pleb? What does that mean for me as someone that I'm trying to understand complexity? And so that compassion that we have for our clients, for our world is there. Recognize, that it's tough out there, but we've got solutions to actually make you feel better and help you relate to your world.
I'm going to ask only one more question before we go to audience Q&A, just so that we can get to it quicker. But this question is really on that premise of moving from change into action. So you've both said that the primary responsibility of design leaders is action, to show people a future that's more exciting, more compelling than their past. How do you move from inspiration to implementation? And what enables a shift from an idea to a sustained systemic change?
It's a great question. We like to say that you can't get there if people don't go with you.
Yeah.
I mean, as a designer, I don't do anything by myself. Like, my preferred mode is doing nothing. That's what I'd like to have. Unfortunately, the phone keeps ringing. And so, and they draw us into their dilemma. So they define their kind of problem, and you kind of get into it. There isn't a kind of singular answer to your question, but the kind of general answer to the question is collaboration. That ultimately, one of the things that we've become quite expert at is helping people define their problem. Almost every client I've ever had expresses the problem as a solution. So they say, we need a new logo. Okay. And you get into it, and it's like, the logo's least of your problems. Yeah. you got some problems, but the logo is not one of them. We're going to do a new one, but it's really over here. And so we've developed a very, very robust method of listening. So we will develop solutions that we will share, but we're not married to any of them. It's really open to say, here's 5 ways of thinking, and each one of these, there's some rules to the game. Each one has to be equally plausible. Each one has to be equally exciting. So you can't have one really good one and then 3 duds that they're not going to choose. And
Because they'll choose the
say,
duds.
number
Just
4.
saying, yeah.
No, we're all into number 4. No, you have to have we did this for the collaboration between Mayo Clinic and ASU. So we developed 5 scenarios, and showed them, the senior teams from both institutions. We showed them the 5 scenarios. And typically what happens in our work is that the team will select 1 or 2. They'll say, number 3 is perfect. We really want to do that. But there's something in number 5 that we don't want to lose. And you have to figure out how to make number 3 also do this piece of number 5. Something like that. Those kinds of things happen. But we learn so much because there are all kinds of questions that we wouldn't think to ask, and pieces of information that they wouldn't think to tell us. So this is a way of actually surfacing all that stuff, and it's incredibly effective. In the case of Mayo and ASU, working with the CEO of both and their teams, they came back and said, we want to do all 5. Yeah, we want you to help sequence them. So, and we design it like, the idea is that you can design a kind of ramp of complexity, investment. So the first one, we can do it today. We have all the people, we have all the permissions, we have the money already. We can do this without changing anything tomorrow morning. The 5th one is, wow, we're going to have to get legislators involved. We're going to change the discipline, change the kind of professional, metrics and that kind of thing. So that one's like really complicated, years and years of work, and there's a kind of bunch of them in between. And so that way of working gives you access to all kinds of information, and it's often the first time that they hear one another. That they've never heard the CEO say, we are not Ivy League, which is actually something that happened to us. We're working on a school that wasn't Ivy League, but the students were absolutely certain that that's what they were getting. And the CEO said, we could never win because we're not Ivy League. We could never win being Ivy League. We could win being innovative because we have that in our that's in front of us to be able to do. So that's the kind of thing where for the institution, it's often deeply, deeply informative and transformational, aside from the work that we do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I'm hearing themes of how you engage your partners and bring them along and also have them inform your process.
I mean,
dialogue.
we did it because our clients, we had very low budget clients, and they would spell out the project, and we would do exactly what they asked for. And then they would say, well, there's actually these guys in the basement we really got to deal with. And they're gonna have something to say about this. And we would have to start over. And so we developed this as a way of saying, let's get all the information out on the table so that we all know, oh, there's actually a group in the basement that has a lot of sway, and we're going to need to actually deal with them.
I just had one quick thing. You asked about change and action. I think education is change, education is action. And you can flip that around and say, change is by education, action is by education. So when I look at the students out there, and you are the future. So we can kind of set, through our education institutions, through the College of Design, we can set up systems by thinking about life-centered design. I love what you said about there are no externalities. We have to think of all of this thing as one. We affect all of this when we design something. So through education, through our students, is how we really get from change to action.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we want to make all of the students unemployable. That's how you get to change. I mean, for real, right?
I'm sure that's not what
I'm
people
sorry,
want to hear.
but I just want to say that. We're unemployable. It's like, when we finish school, right, you have a skill set that you actually want to make things and do things. And so the change is entrepreneurial, and it's just do it. I think part of the Kusky lecture was that you decided we're going to smash it up. We're going to make these marriages, and we're going to put all these things together. And we say, just go for it. I mean, people say, I organized a conference with like 70 students in 5 weeks. I'm like, what are you doing? You want to go to Washington? Did you want to present your projects? Let's go do it. Do it. And you do it. Perfect is the enemy of good. And so then they want to actually continue doing the thing. But that's what I would say. Like what our practice has moved to is, I say this, no more memos. If you show me a memo, I'm going to kill it. I just want a demonstration. No more memos, only demos. And so that's the job. Show me how. That's the world that we're looking for. People will have whys, but they don't know how. Designers know how to do things, and that is the skill set that's required now. Just do it.
All right, I'm going to open it up for audience questions. We'd love to hear your questions. We have mic runners right here. Feel free to flag them down. They will bring a microphone to you if you have anything that you'd like to ask. I'm curious to know how this resonates.
One there.
A couple of things that you mentioned throughout the lecture. You've mentioned as perhaps a goal isn't the best idea, but you mentioned new wealth and the creation of new wealth a couple of different times. And you've also mentioned the idea of life-centered design as opposed to human-centered design a couple of different times throughout this lecture. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about how those two concepts interact with each other, in your opinion.
And so what are the two concepts?
New wealth and life-centered design specifically as opposed to human-centered design.
Sure. For me, if we look at the challenges, the kind of cloud problems that we're talking about as success problems, those challenges are radically vexing and very, very complex to solve. The way to solve them is to think about them in context and to really begin to think about designing the ecosystem. So for instance, we're working on the unhoused. The data that BC did for that was really kind of shocking. In Arizona, we spend over $100,000 per unhoused person to keep them unhoused. So we're spending $100,000 per person and not solving the problem. We have about 3.5 full-time equivalent people for every unhoused person. So in the system, we have evolved a system that is radically inefficient and is not lacking in either resources or care, which when you see a homeless person on the street, you think these people don't care. Like this place doesn't care. That's not the case. The data shows that we care a lot. We assign, it's like assigning a full-time person 3.5 shifts a day, and so it's kind of extraordinary care for each person. When we are able to actually articulate the ecosystem of the unhoused, you start to see what's actually going on and where where the resources are distributed and how challenging it is to actually navigate that system. So if we can improve that system, we can reduce what we have to pay, what we spend on the unhoused, and at the same time, radically improve the performance. So we can actually solve the problem. It's not unsolvable. It's just that we don't design in that way. So for me, that's a good example of producing the results that we need at the ecosystem level, and also changing the economics of it, which will create new wealth. Now, you can then go much beyond that and say, some of the challenges that we face in terms of energy, for instance. If you can, there are people all over the world who are innovating new energy systems, and we are in a process, we have to realize how radical it is in the history of humankind to change our source of energy. Right? We're going to, it's only happened a few times in history. And we are in the midst of that revolution, that we are changing the source of energy. And the people who do that, the people who sort out how to make batteries that don't need rare earth, for instance, how to store energy without using rare earth that has to be mined in conflict zones. The people who figure that out are going to generate vast amount of new wealth. and contribute ecologically, economically, socially. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity from an entrepreneurial perspective. And so that's why in design, we say that good is bad, right? That bad is good, and terrible is awesome. So we have an inverse relationship to trouble. Right? If things are good, we're not needed. There's no opportunity for us. Like, don't call me if everything's fine. But if things are not fine, if you're struggling, I can contribute a lot. And that's really what we mean by that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I follow.
Okay. Thank you. That's a great question. There's one here, Tom, up front.
So you mentioned the importance of democracy. If you were engaged by someone to improve the state of our democracy, where would you begin?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. It's a great question. I think you have to just, sort of off the top, which is often a good place to start. Off the top, I would say you have to inspire a new energy in the idea of democracy. So you got to reframe it in a way that inspires people. Because right now it's been kind of like we're kind of certain that it doesn't work, which is not a great place to be. It's a hard place to start from. But I think that for me is the first place to say, we need to do something that demonstrates how effective it is, and especially to see what we have accomplished. For me, I'm from Canada, and in Canada there has been an argument for 50 years about whether or not there is a Canadian identity. It's like, I mean, not about what it is, but whether or not there is one. And it's such a radically stupid problem because the moment you cross the border, you realize, oh, wow, this place is entirely different. I mean, it's just a wild scene. And I think that wildness is one of the greatest gifts to humankind. The wildness of America, the beauty of your crazy minds, and the kind of shit that you do, it's so great, and Americans don't see it. They don't see what you don't see what you've accomplished. You don't see how amazing you are. You don't see all the things that you give to the world. Now, I'm not Pollyanna. I understand that you were also taken from the world. So, but I think when you do all the math, you realize this place is a gift to mankind, and we've lost the thread. And we have to recover that thread and really step into owning that responsibility and owning that, like I think, everybody's talking about the end of this and the end of that. It's not the end of anything. Like, we have such amazing assets and so much energy and creativity in the culture that no one can match yet. They will eventually if we let them. But I remember a long time ago, during the financial crisis, Warren Buffett was asked about whether he's bullish on America. And he said yes, because America has the best universities in the world by a long shot. And those universities are the engine for development and growth. And that's why he loves America. And I was like, I mean, that's really who we are. And so I think there's a project to be done. I mean, Julio and I have been arguing about this. Well, not really arguing, but I've been pestering him with the idea that we have to actually do a major project to reinforce the meaning of science. Like you think about what science has produced. Like in Chicago, we have the Fermilab particle accelerator. If you went into the university and asked, where is it? I would hazard a guess that 90% of people don't know it's in Chicago. We don't know what we've, like the Fermilab is a freaking insanely brilliant invention that changed the world, changed history. And we don't even know that it's there. And so people don't really fully understand who they are and what they've accomplished. And so I think that's where I would start in terms of getting at your problem, which is a great problem. If you want to do it, I'd love to do it.
Hey, Bruce Beasy, thank you so much. This has been a terrific evening. I have a question. Since so much of this is about opportunity and aspiration, et cetera, why are we stuck with the concept of sustainability? What are we sustaining?
I totally agree.
I mean, isn't that
totally
the
agree.
ultimate in externality? I mean,
Yeah.
what is it?
We
And
never
how do we
use
get
it.
beyond it?
We never
never
used
use the
that
word.
word, and we
Like it's-
realized when we started that we'd reached, as a society, through data and information, peak sustainability 30 years ago. That people were unwilling to sacrifice to sustain because it's, where's the horizon?
I mean, it just
So
has
we
such a negative
negative thing. Like,
framing, like we framed it negatively.
right, so you go like,
That-
how's
that-
your relationship? You go, oh, sustainable, right? Like, is that like, okay, I'm signing up for that? Beyond a situationship? So, so we by design do not use that language. And it's not fake abundance. But when we talk about it, we think about other ways of building legacy, of thinking about long-term effects, right? Beyond the quarterly return. So sustainable is a bad word, and it's a punishing word. I mean, I know we talked about this. You don't get anywhere when you shame and blame people. Think of anyone when you shame and blame someone, how motivated they are to do anything, like zero. And so we kind of use the language of, you know what? Okay. This is reality, but it doesn't have to stay this way. You actually have the opportunity to change your situation. That's design, right? And so that's a great question, and it's your ecology. Nobody wants to sustain. It's boring.
But it's still so present.
What's that?
In a design dialogue, it's still so present. As
Yeah.
an architect and a planner, I understand that people have been drawn to the concept of
Can you get the mic frame so that other people can hear?
Yeah.
No worries.
No, I have to agree with you completely, BZ. It's a very confounding concept, but as a designer and an architect and a planner, people are drawing at straws, and this concept still is in the sort of the ether sphere of discussion, which is very strange. And from an architectural point of view, they sort of stepped backwards and said, okay, instead of sustainability, let's talk about resiliency. And which is equally as destructive because everything's being built as its own self-protective attitude. And we're getting so far away from the collective resolve of everything, all the beauty that you guys are bringing to the table. So these are the concepts we really need to pierce,
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, but you hit the work. One of the
think you're
things that we recognize is that change is really hard to see. Like you don't see your hair growing until one day you notice it's a couple inches longer. If you're losing weight, you don't notice that you're losing weight until like your pants feel a little different. And one of the things that we've been tackling is the narrative, right? So it started with things are bad. We're never going to meet our sustainability goals, da 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 da. And by the way, we're moving that way. A little secret, which is why we use the language of actionist at COP and to get the world leaders to think of themselves with that mindset, was, you know what, we are working towards environmental change and ecological change. The thing is that it takes a concerted effort and so much effort to raise the bar. So if you start now, when we get to 2030, The news is going to be they got to 3% of their sustainability goals. But you know what? 3% is a rock star number. It's unbelievable because then it goes exponential. People don't understand exponential. So it's 3%, then it goes 7, then 14, and you hit the goals. But the idea is to start. And so you realize that people will say, oh, well, you know, if you don't understand that 3% is a big deal, you think it's a nothing burger, right? And you don't understand how you get there. And so part of it is design is also changing the narrative, right? So you're not a loser because you didn't get to that. Actually, you're winning. It just takes time, and then you'll see exponential. So that's why if you ask me why I'm bullish, right?
But there's kind of two different problems nested together. Because one is branding. It's like, how do we brand transformation, right? Change. And the other is the technical accomplishment of, you know, how do we get to do the right things? And they're kind of locked together often, that it's very hard to kind of extract them. But I think that, you know, what BC's onto here, excuse me, what BC's onto is really important. It's like, you know, when they were working on the Genome Project, it took them,
15
you know,
years.
all the scientists said that you really, you know, it's going to take 700 years because it took 7 years to do 1%. And Ray Kurzweil said it's going to take 15 years because, and after 7 years, they said, Ray, you know, you're obviously wildly off. It's going to be hundreds of years. I mean, we thought it was going to be 100, but it's going to be hundreds. And he said, no, we're right on schedule. And if you take one and you double it 7 times, it's over 100. And that's the exponential experience that most people can't apprehend, you know, because our world is, our experience is linear, but we're living in an exponential revolution. So we've got this revolution happening around us, but our daily experience is, if it takes me 10 minutes to get, you know, 1 block, it'll take 20 minutes to get 2. And so that is the kind of conflict that we're struggling with.
Yes, one thing.
We have time for one more question, so it's going to be you.
My question is, I'm curious from your perspectives, what are some of these other silent revolutions? Can you make them visible to us here?
Sorry, the revolutions that are happening?
The silent ones that you are seeing from your perspectives.
Yeah. So if you think about you know, I went to the airport a few days ago, and at the airport there was a model of a quantum computer that is being built in Chicago, and they now have a working quantum computer that connects to a regular computer. So you can actually use the computer as an interface and get the quantum benefits. And that is going to, I mean, that is such a fundamental order of magnitude transformation that is going to affect all the things, you know, everything we do, because it essentially takes time out of the process. And all of our security methods, all the security infrastructure in the world is based on time. So you know, if I have a bank, I put a lock on that bank that would take 15,000 years to crack. It's not that it can't be done, but it would take 15,000 years, so nobody does it. You know, no one even tries. And that's basically the model of security all across the system. If you take time out of the system, wow, suddenly everything is open. Like everything changes. And you know, so I think quantum is a revolution. Energy is a revolution. We're changing the fundamental input to economy and culture. And you know, in working on COP, COP is the conference of the parties. It's the biggest environmental conference that happens every year somewhere in the world. And the one that we designed was 75,000 people a day for 13 days, with all kinds of complexity beyond imagination. But one of the things that was very controversial about that COP was that it was the head of the oil company in UAE who was named as the president of COP. And people all over the world, protesters all over the world were furious about that. But what you realize, what most demonstrators and protesters don't acknowledge is that we're telling the energy companies, don't turn the lights off, but change everything. So we need you to transform everything about your business to a model that is no longer damaging the environment. But we're going to have to run this stuff while we do that. So make sure the lights don't go off. Can you imagine the complexity of that challenge? But that's what we're doing. So, we had a recording of the meeting. Well, there was a meeting where basically the president of COP said, we're the ones who can do it. The only people who can actually design the transformation that we need at the scale that we need it are the people who work at that scale. They work at global scale. They work on fundamental transformation and innovation. They work on energy at the scale that we need to reconceive it. So, I'm not going to be the one to do that. We need
Expertise.
super experienced engineers and many, many, many of them working in the right direction. So these are the kinds of things that are happening that, and then of course the AI revolution and the genetics revolution, these are things that you're going to experience in your lifetime in a way like no previous generation has had to deal with because of the speed of change. The quantum computing is going to radically change what's possible, and it's going to do it. They're building a campus in Chicago that's like the world center for quantum computing that is going to be bigger than Fermilab, and it's going to be rock and roll.
I think you're going to have amazing tools.
Yeah, it's like,
that's what I see is
phenomenal.
that it's not the thing, it's the tools that you get to work with that will enable the possibilities that you see and that you want. And, one of the things you have to think about is nothing is guaranteed, not even possibilities. So you need to foster that. You need to have that belief that anything is possible. And when you do that, you get to shape what you put your time and attention to. And part of me thinks, what's the sexy field? I think it's going to be hard tech. And hard tech is going to require, design, and it's going to require different thinking. And you get to actually work and make life better for all life on the planet and our existence, and, use the full bandwidth of your skills. And I think that's, if I was going to think of anything at the nexus, art, science, and technology, is that's what quantum is going to allow you to do, to figure out with your imagination, if I did X, Y, or Z, then I could do this, and then I could apply my beautiful creative mind to designing these solutions, right? Because it becomes completely democratized. So think of them as tools that you can add and supercharge your beautiful, crazy, imaginative selves to think of the things that you want to solve. So I wouldn't be afraid of them. Work with them and make them your friends, because I think that's how we're going to do it. It's that end. Does that answer your question? You feel better? Yeah, okay, cool.
I think that is actually a lovely note to end on. So thank you, Bruce and BZ, for sharing our powerful reminder of what happens when design acts as a catalyst for change. Tonight's conversation beautifully reflects KDI's mission to imagine new ways of learning, collaborating, and acting across disciplines and communities. I hope each of us leaves with a spark, an idea, a question, a moment that shifts how you view your own work and impact. And on behalf of the University of Minnesota, College of Design, and the Kusky Design Initiative, thank you all for being a part of this dialogue and for helping shape what's next.
Thank you.